as we welcome in Joe Madden. And Joe's Twitter bio is on-air host and analyst at SportsGrid TV. She's no stranger to our audience. She says she's easily distracted by in-game betting, which is cool. Joe, hang on. We just have a question from a viewer here, and I want to address it quickly. It's Larry in Stony Plain, Alberta, and he says, Nathan Rourke to the Jets? Signed Larry in Stony Plain. We addressed it last hour with Jim Barker. I would ask you to go back and look at that. Jim said that if it was going to happen, it probably would have happened by now. Actually, Joe, that might be a good place to start. How did Aaron Rodgers' Achilles injury just change the entire landscape of NFL betting? Forget about, on field, I guess. What did it do to the betting world?
With their odds to win their division to get to the Super Bowl. So you're going to get more value there. One thing about the Jets, though, I don't trust Zach Wilson that much. We saw what he did last season, but he had all that time to work with Aaron Rodgers. And we saw a couple of those passes looking very Aaron Rodgers-ish out there by Zach Wilson. The one that he threw low to his wide receiver out there because the wide receiver had coverage was exactly like Aaron Rodgers. So I don't know if he had enough time and mentorship to be able to carry this team as deep as I would have thought before. But they're not going off Zach Wilson. They've made it a statement out there. Zach Wilson is our guy and what he was able to do. Now, this team, why I had so much faith in them was their defense, and their defense still showed in that game. They were able to rise above and do what we expected this defense to do. So big test this week. We'll see if this defense can hold up and give as much effort as they did in week one.
Dallas Cowboys favored by 9 at Jerry World against the New York Jets and Zach Wilson. By the way, I will tell our audience, if you got questions for Joe, fire them at us now. 902-518-3033 for EMJ Marketing. That's our text line sponsor, or on the streams. But Joe, let's just walk it back for a second. And I'm sure you're already looking ahead to this weekend's week 2 and everything else. But what did you think with the Bills favored by 2 on the road at the Jets? You're watching the game, Aaron coming out with a flag, and it only lasts 4 plays. What were you thinking when this was all unfolding?
It was absolutely heartbreaking. And I had a little moment of tears because I really did see that Aaron Rodgers wouldn't be back on the field. Everyone's saying Achilles here. I know he wants to come back, but turning 40 this season, I don't know if we see Aaron Rodgers getting back there on the field. And yes, he wants to come back. We all want him to come back and go out of football the way he wants to go out of football. And the Jets organization and him becoming their quarterback was meant to be that out for him. Come here, turn around this Jets team, take them deep into the playoffs. They didn't even have to go to the Super Bowl, and it would have been a win there for Aaron Rodgers. So absolutely heartbreaking. On a money side of things, I was devastated to start because I had the Jets on that money line. We all know they were able to come back and get the win. But right away I went, Zach Wilson, there's no way this team is going to win this, even if the defense is 100%. With Zach Wilson under center. But he did show glimpses in that game. The Bills defense gave him a lot of pressure, and some of these teams won't give him as much pressure. The Cowboys are going to destroy him this weekend, though.
Are you saying they cover the spread of 9?
No, I'm not saying that.
No?
I think we've got a lower scoring game. I think both defenses, but you've got to look at the Cowboys. Micah Parsons, his ability to get those sacks, to put that pressure on Zach Wilson. Poor Zach Wilson, this offensive line already had question marks. He's going to have to scramble out there. I see a lot of that ball being checked down. I see him short passes, a lot of a running game, because otherwise he's going to be destroyed by Micah Parsons. This is a big player running at him, and Zach Wilson won't have enough power in front of him to be able to stop Micah Parsons. So lower scoring one, I think we stay under that number. I think the Jets can do enough defensively to keep this tight, because you've got to look at the defense of the Jets, what they did versus the Buffalo Bills. They're going to come out, and we saw the Cowboys railroad the Giants, yes, but Giants don't have the same defense that they have here. So I think the Jets defense can hold them in this game and cover that spread.
Ryan from upstate New York writes in. He says, despite the loss of Rodgers, I'm proud of the way the Jets fought and scraped to get the win. Yeah, it was, who saw that coming? And, of course, they call it complimentary football. They did it on special teams with the touchdown to win the game. But, hey, Joe, not so much the serious hardcore questions here betting, but I got to ask you this. Because I follow your stuff, and if you don't, people, you have to. Go follow her at Joe Madden Sports. That's Joe without the E. Madden Sports. You called the Ravens preseason win streak ending at 24 games in Washington. And for a while that night, it didn't look like it was going to. It went down to the last minute. Can you please tell me, how do you know these things? Or what sort of sense did you have earlier in the day that they weren't going to win that preseason finale?
You know what? All streaks come to an end, and you've got to look at certain situations and how teams are going into things and what the other team has to gain there. Well, Washington had a huge chip on their shoulder. They were all talking about how the Ravens winning in preseason, it means nothing. Well, it just told me this Washington team was coming for blood. They wanted to end the Ravens' win ability in preseason, and that's exactly what they did. So you've got to look at these personal angles and how these teams are preparing and what their motivation is. Well, Washington's motivation was to beat the Ravens because now everyone's going to remember, well, the Ravens went on this huge preseason win streak. Which team broke it? The Washington Commanders. Everyone's going to remember that. So fascinating how you do this, and any betting experts, and Andy McNamara coming up next segment. It'll be a lot of this type of talk. I couldn't do it. The homework, I was not a homework guy, Joe. That shouldn't surprise anybody. The homework required to do what you do is unbelievable. Now, so Bomber Boy in Calgary writes in, says, does Joe think Jordan Love is the real deal in Calgary? He's Bomber Boy's in Calgary. He says, do you think Jordan Love is the real deal? He certainly showed it last week in Chicago for the Packers. They're at Atlanta this week. Slim line, 1.5. Falcons favored. What do you expect out of Jordan Love in that division? I'm not sure exactly what I expect. I did watch him in that game, and he looked phenomenal out there. He has a huge role to fill, filling the shoes of Aaron Rodgers, and I think he hasn't had enough time on that field. I do like him in this matchup coming up, though. I think we can see a good one there. But moving ahead to face stronger teams, that's when I'm going to hold my judgment on him, is when we see him deeper into that. And you've got Andy on next. It's funny because ask him who Jandy is. Question for you to ask who Jandy is.
I'm guessing it's a combination of you two somehow. Jandy, I will.
It is.
He's a great guy. He's the shining light as well. But, one thing I learned when you were on our show at Century Downs, and then, I've been following your stuff ever since you first came across my radar, but you do a lot of CFL talk, and it's popular. Yeah. It's getting a lot of views. And the reason I bring that up is I was on the radio in Edmonton this morning, the brand new all-sports radio station, Sports 1440. And they said, you're into betting, we're not. We think it's going to be a Winnipeg-Toronto Grey Cup. Wake us up on Grey Cup Sunday morning so we can watch the game, Winnipeg-Toronto. How do you feel about that comment as somebody who does far more homework than any of us do?
Well, Toronto, I absolutely love what we're seeing out of Toronto. Chad Kelly is phenomenal. If Chad Kelly doesn't stay healthy, this team does not even stand a chance. Toronto will be out of this and they won't be able to win. You can't even take him for a touchdown without laying like minus 200 juice because Chad Kelly is such a dual threat quarterback. Looking at Winnipeg, I do like what we've seen out of Winnipeg facing Montreal. We got Zach Collaros coming out this week. I think Winnipeg is a strong team. They're able to move that ball down the field. Their defense is strong. But I don't know if you can count out the BC Lions at this point. And yes, the BC Lions have gone over these last 3, 4, 5 games, and they've been struggling out there. But their quarterback, Vernon Adams Jr., is just so phenomenally strong that I struggle not to see them fighting to get into the Grey Cup this season. And I do think they probably can. Now, who would that be over? Well, if I had to pick out of the 3 teams, I think it'd be Toronto and BC.
Well, so you're not necessarily ready to pencil in a Toronto-Winnipeg Grey Cup for a second consecutive year. That's the sense that I'm getting from you?
No, I'm not. So I just don't see it happening. I just look at Winnipeg, and yes, they're very strong out there, but the BC Lions are fighters and they're scrappy. And with them going on this losing streak, we know teams go on these streaks where they're not able to cover the spread. They struggle to get these wins, and then they bounce back and they come back even harder. I think Toronto hit it at a right time. The BC Lions hit it at a right time, and they're going to through this and make those adjustments. And I think they're going to be on fire for the rest of the season going into the playoff.
How much time are you spending on NHL these days?
Oh, not too much on NHL. Just starting to look at those win totals coming up for the future bets, getting those out there, looking at these teams. So heavy right now on college football, on CFL and NFL, and of course, baseball. Baseball, stabbed me in the eye right now, especially if you're a Toronto Blue Jays fan. Like I am, this team absolutely breaking my heart. So betting against them today versus the Red Sox. But otherwise, yeah, starting to get into the NHL, can hardly wait for the season. I think the team that's going to be unstoppable is the New Jersey Devils. You add Toffoli to already that young, explosive offense, and I don't know, this is going to be a team that can go really deep this season. So they're a team I'm looking at a lot for this upcoming one.
I know. I was wondering if they were going to be a flash in the pan or keep the pedal to the metal, and I'm thinking they're going to keep the pedal to the metal. Yeah. I mean, I've been watching SportsGrid with you on there. I could sit here and ask you NASCAR questions, college football, as you say. Let me ask you this. Who's the best college team in Florida, the Miami Hurricanes or Florida State Seminoles? It's a topic of considerable debate down here.
Yeah, that's a huge debate. I don't know. I'd have to go with the Hurricanes, I think. I really do look at this team, and I think they're the more complete team. I trust their defense a lot more. And for me, it's always, I look at those defenses, and that's where I start with my handicapping, because yes, you can have the flashiest quarterback. Well, if you've got this defense out there and you've got an offense that can move the ball, but this defense shuts them down week in and week out, those are the teams that I'm really interested in seeing getting out there in those games. So excited for that. The Buckeyes play tomorrow against Western Kentucky. That's going to be a really interesting matchup. So I'm excited for that. I'm a Buckeyes fan. Can they cover that spread? They're like 23 points. Doubtful. They've also got Notre Dame on deck. That team completely stacked with Sam Howell. We look at Western Kentucky that they're facing tonight. Well, that team is going to be the strongest team offensively with the passing game that Ohio State has played. So not covering that spread tomorrow.
How disappointing and devastating. No, how devastating was Alabama's home loss to Texas last week? I'm a Crimson Tide fan. That was not good.
Is not good, not at all. But Texas was in a total look-ahead situation. You look at their game the prior week. I believe it was versus Rice. I might have my games mixed up, but they didn't cover that spread. Yeah. So they came out, they didn't cover that spread because they were in a look-ahead situation. Texas was 100% focused on that game with Alabama. They came out so strong in it, and Alabama made a couple mistakes, and that's what it came down to. There was mistakes by Alabama. Texas was able to capitalize, and yeah, they were able to get that win. So looking at these huge games and looking at the games prior to those and the games after for those letdown spots. So I don't have Texas circled for this week, probably because in my mind, it's a letdown spot after that huge win versus Alabama.
Fascinating what you do. Joe, thanks. We'll let you get back to work. Thanks for the time today.
Have a good one. Thanks so much.
You too. Joe Madden of SportsGrid TV.